welcome to the You're So Quiet podcast. As always, I'm your host, Chelsea Brown. It is part 2 of our Halloween episodes, and I'm so excited to tell you what I've found out this week. I have been virtually mainlining Halloween content, but that's kind of just the way I like it. So before we jump in, let's first do a mental health check. For me personally, my mental health is real bad at the moment. So you may or may not know that I'm in the process of starting a YouTube channel for this podcast. And I plan to do video podcasts like where you see me talking to you. And I think it'd be a really cool addition. And I always like watching videos, sometimes better than just listening to audio. I think audio has its place, but video can just be that little extra oomph, you know what I mean? So I have been trying for the past week or two, and the lighting is just not working out, and I think I underestimated how difficult it is to be on camera. When it's just me talking to you, I can look wherever. I don't really have to think about what my face is doing. So yeah, I think I just underestimated that. And in doing so, I really started to get frustrated because this is not working. And I'm not someone who is okay with like just good enough. I kind of want to put something out that I'm going to be proud of, you know, and proud of in the future as well. Not just like, I did it. Oh, whew, no. Like I want to look at this weeks or years from now and be like, that was freaking awesome. So today I had a little bit of a breakdown, just a very small explosion. I stayed up really late last night trying to film both this episode and a trailer. I tried to get some edits in and it was not it. It was not it. So my husband, who does amazing video, he was giving me some feedback like, hey, let's work on your lighting, etc. And I just started crying because I'm exhausted. If you know anything about me, you know that 8 to 9 hours is ideal. Anything less than that, my mood drops off pretty quick. So he was giving me feedback and I started crying, and he's like, so what's going on? Like, what happened? So I was just telling him, like, look, I'm just really frustrated. I'm trying so hard to get this going. I'm like putting all this pressure on myself to put out this great content, and I'm trying to do it with a really quick turnaround. Because to be perfectly honest, a week or two to get this thing up and running is not a lot of time. So he kind of talked me through it, and I feel somewhat better now. I'm still extremely tired. I think I need to go to bed early. And after I'm done recording here, I am going to go for a walk with my dog. I am going to eat Taco Bell, and we ordered like 4 different kinds of ice cream from Baskin Robbins. So I'm going to do that too and just kind of relax, because the last like week or so for me has been terrible. Absolutely terrible. But on the positive side of things, I did get to do a really fun photo shoot for the podcast, actually, and you can go see it on the podcast Instagram at You're So Quiet Pod, YOURE, So Quiet Pod. If you're not into gore, if like fake blood is gonna bother you, maybe steer clear. But it is kind of frightening imagery, and I think it turned out great. I didn't edit the photos in any way. It's all done just with makeup. I had colored contacts. I used portrait mode on my iPhone, and those are the photos that came out. I think they turned out awesome. So you can go take a look at that. I'm very proud of those. And it had been a while since I'd done a fun photo shoot with myself. So that was a good time. If you are also having just a rough week, it's fine. You know, just take a second, take the evening for yourself, take a bath, like whatever is going to make you feel better or like get you through the day. Go ahead and do that. I think that we all need to learn to be more gentle and kind to ourselves, because I know that when I'm not meeting my own standards, I become very, very harsh. And I frankly would never speak to anybody else the way that I speak to myself. And I think that that's kind of a problem. I should speak to myself with the same kindness and grace that I would give someone I didn't know, you know? So if you're also going through it at the moment, I feel you. I'm right there with you, but we can make it through this, okay? So with that being said, let's jump into what I have been consuming modern spooky edition. Last episode, I did classic spooky edition. Now we're doing more modern. I have 4 TV series for you. The first 2 are related, but not the same. It's The Haunting of Hill House and The Haunting of Bly Manor. They are both on Netflix. I think they both have 10 one-hour episodes, and they are absolutely phenomenal horror TV shows. I think that horror is the best when it comes with a story. So with The Haunting of Hill House and The Haunting of Bly Manor, you learn a lot about the main characters, and you also learn a lot about the ghosts that are haunting the house, and same with Haunting of Bly Manor as well. So I highly, highly recommend those. I've watched them both a couple of times. So yes, if you're looking for genuinely frightening Halloween TV, that is the move. I also rewatched Scream, the Scream TV series. It's actually an MTV series that's on Netflix now. There are 3 seasons, but I've only watched the first 2 seasons. It's more of like a slasher. So if you're not really into haunting kind of stuff, but you want something a little scary, the Scream TV series is the move for you. It's a high school drama, but with a serial killer. So if you liked, for example, Pretty Little Liars, I think you will really like the Scream series. I also recently started Midnight Mass. It's funny because my husband, who does not like horror, demonic, whatever stuff, he was like, oh, I got a recommendation to watch this. I'm like, you cannot watch that. He's like, why? I'm like, it's a scary show. He's like, have you watched it? I'm like, no, but like, read the synopsis, dude. Like, we know what it's about. But we're watching it, both of us together. I think we've watched 3 episodes so far, and it's pretty scary. For me, it's like medium scary. Okay, and actually, the latest episode we watched, I think it was the 3rd one, they actually revealed what the monsters looked like. And that, to me, like, really takes away the scary factor. If I already know what's lurking in the dark, to me, it's not that frightening. But my husband, on the other hand, has had nightmares about the creatures, so much so that a couple nights ago, he thought that something, like, grabbed him, you know? And I'm like, babe, do you want to stop watching the show? He's like, no, it's fine. I'm like, okay, got it. But I think it might also be not as scary for him now that the monsters have been revealed. And I'm not going to tell you like the twist or anything, but I think it's an interesting watch. And it's set in like a small town, so, you know, everyone knows everyone's business kind of thing. So that's an interesting one for sure, and definitely gets you in the spooky season spirit. Now, as far as books, I'm actually in the middle of 2 different books. I'm reading The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. It just released in 2021. And to be perfectly honest with you, I'm not really loving it. I think 25% of the way through, and it's just not grabbing me, you know? It's just one of those stories. I'm reading it with some people that I know on Instagram, and they're telling me like, you have to keep reading it, it gets better. But I'm really finding it hard to pick it up. So it might work for you. Personally, not working for me. It's based off of the idea of a child abduction, and there are several different narrators, several different perspectives. So truthfully, I can't really tell you what it's about beyond that because I have not gotten more than a quarter of the way through this book. So that's I might finish it, I might not. I guess we'll see. I am also reading The Heart-Shaped Box by Joe Hill. This came out in 2010, so it's a little older. But Joe Hill is actually Stephen King's son. And I think that writing really good horror must run in the family because it is frightening. I think I am about 20% of the way through, and this book has given me nightmares already. And to be perfectly honest, I am curious to see where it goes because, like, it feels like the first 20% is already a full story, so I'm very, very interested. It's based off of the idea of a famous rock star who's into the occult. He buys a dead man's suit that is supposedly haunted, and he ends up buying a ghost. So I'm not going to give away any more than that, but I highly recommend that one. It's also one that my mother recommended to me. She is a huge horror fan, and she's very critical of books. So if she likes it, it is probably a good one. Now, as far as movies, I kind of wanted to give a little bit of variety. So what I have been watching is Monster House. This is an animated movie. Came out in 2006. It's lightly scary, but it is animated. It's about a haunted house, and a trio of children try to free the house from its haunting or whatever. It's pretty light. It's a really lighthearted. It's good if you have younger children or if you yourself are just like, again, I want something, kind of creepy. So yeah, Monster House, I've liked it, to be perfectly honest, since it's come out. I got it as a gift, I think, when I was a teenager, and ever since I've watched it every year around Halloween time. It gives me the same kind of vibes as Hocus Pocus. It's not really that scary, but it's a good, mood setter. And to bump up a notch in the scary scale is The Grudge, 2004. I think we kind of all know the imagery from The Grudge. It's the girl with the curtain of black hair. So that one's medium scary. I rewatched it and it's medium scary. If imagery is gonna bother you, then that one's gonna get you. But otherwise, I think you'll be perfectly fine. And the last one, top scary in my opinion, is Hereditary. Hereditary came out in 2018. It's basically about a woman whose mother passes away. The woman's daughter and eventually her son start to experience strange visions and compulsions, and her husband doesn't believe her, but truthfully, I have only been able to watch this movie twice because it is very, very scary to me. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the imagery or the idea, but peak scary. Watch it with someone, in my opinion. So as I was prepping for this episode, I watched a bunch of movies, and I started to notice that some were actually based on a true story. And so I was really curious about specifically possessions based on a true story, because it seems to me, before I started researching, that possessions were actually far more common maybe 40, 50 years ago than they are now. And I was curious why that was and if that would actually show through in film. So we're going to be talking about The Rite, we're going to be talking about The Conjuring, and The Exorcism of Emily Rose right after this. Okay, welcome back. Now we're going to talk about possessions. So first, I want to clarify what qualifies as a possession. What actually is a possession? A possession occurs when a demonic entity or a ghost enters into a human host. Signs of possession include aversion to religious objects or phrases, so they won't be able to touch a cross or say a prayer or go into a church. Another sign, and very common one, is change in language and vocabulary, so speaking in languages that they have not studied and could not know. So for example, Latin or Aramaic or German, these languages in particular are seen a lot, and I think Latin and Aramaic specifically because it was the language of Jesus. So all of these things together and more signify a possession has taken place, or supposedly signify that a possession has taken place. While I think movies based on a true story, specifically horror movies based on a true story, are more frightening, I also think that in some ways it makes me question what is reality. So if someone believes they're possessed or are believed to be possessed, is it demonic possession or is it undiagnosed mental illness? Right? So that's what we're going to be diving into today. And this is especially evident in The Exorcism of Emily Rose. It is a movie that came out in 2005, and it's inspired by the possession and exorcism of Anneliese Michel in Germany. It all began in 1968. Anneliese started to experience convulsions. Her first epileptic attack followed the next year, and she was diagnosed with epilepsy. After her diagnosis, she started experiencing visual and auditory hallucinations, specifically while praying about demons. A couple of years later, she is understandably depressed and even suicidal. 2 years following, she is convinced that she's possessed, and her family is convinced with her. And this is particularly interesting to me because in the early 70s or late 60s, and I mean, just to clarify, I'm not an expert on mental illness. However, I think that mental illness and mental health, mental wellness was not a huge priority. So I thought it was particularly interesting that although she is diagnosed epileptic, 5 to 7 years later, she's convinced that she's possessed by a demon, when her behavior is actually explainable by mental illness, specifically schizophrenia. But nonetheless, she and her family are convinced that she's possessed by a demon. So they stopped seeking out medical attention from doctors and instead decided to rely solely on exorcisms. This to me seems very dangerous because Anneliese clearly needed medical attention. At one point, she actually stopped eating because she felt that fasting would cleanse her body of the demon. Okay, so her nutritional needs are clearly not being met. So even outside of her epilepsy, she clearly needs medical attention. However, her symptoms worsened to the point where she was seeing faces of demons and people around her, and even believed that she was possessed by several demons, including Judas and Lucifer. She would eat insects, she would bark like a dog, and even lick her own urine from the floor. So all of these things eventually convinced the church that she did, in fact, need an exorcism. She ended up getting dozens of exorcisms throughout her life and eventually passed away from malnutrition at 68 pounds. The film, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, appeared to stay more or less true to the real story of Anneliese, but it's heavily dramatized, kind of as expected. It's a movie, it is based on real people, but it is designed to entertain us, and because it's a horror movie, it's designed to scare us. What I think is particularly interesting is Anneliese herself was raised in a devout Catholic family. So there is speculation that Anneliese could have watched the Exorcist movie and kind of mirrored those signs of possessions as seen in the Exorcist movie, because the timeline kind of lines up, right? The Exorcist movie came out in 1973, and it was 2 years later that Anneliese was decided that she was possessed. And this speculation is actually backed up by the fact that her signs of possession were strikingly similar to the Exorcist movie. However, this isn't to say that she was faking her possession, right? I think that she truly 100% believed that she was possessed by a demon or multiple demons. But I do believe that she was mentally ill, and did not receive adequate care. Religious delusions, particularly as related to schizophrenia, are very, very common. In a review of 70 studies on this topic, 43% of the 70 studies found a direct correlation between delusions and religious or supernatural beliefs. So, in my opinion, it was a combination of the Exorcist movie, of her religious beliefs, and of her mental state that ended her up in this position. And in the early 70s, mental illness wasn't treated the same as it is today. Today, you're not going to ship someone off to a psychiatric unit because they're schizophrenic. Schizophrenia is definitely treatable. But in the early 70s, it wasn't seen that way. And it might have actually been a better outlook from her perspective, thinking that I'm possessed by a demon, I need to have an exorcism, and then I'll go back to my normal life, as opposed to I have a mental illness and this is my life. I think that the conversation on mental illness and demonic possession isn't talked about enough, and particularly the way in which media can influence people in that particular state of mind. So I was curious if there were other instances where media, specifically the Exorcist movie that came out in 1973, influenced someone's perception of events as related to potentially mental illness, or just how they see certain phenomena taking place in their home, for example. And the next example I have for you with this is The Conjuring. This is a very popular series now. The third installment actually just came out. But yeah, The Conjuring came out in 2013. It is inspired by the possession of Carolyn Perron and the experiences of the Perron family. So the story goes that they moved to the Rhode Island farmhouse that is featured in the film in 1970 and moved out in 1980. In this 10-year period, they experienced all sorts of crazy kind of demonic activity, including things, just the air smelling randomly like rotting flesh, like beds lifting at around 5 o'clock in the morning, things moving without people actually touching them. So the family investigated their house, and they found that the house was owned by a woman named Bathsheba. This woman was said to have been a witch, but there's actually no evidence to back this up. Nevertheless, it is said that she sacrificed her children to the devil and killed herself on the property. Right before she was about to end her life, she cursed anyone who would try to take her land. So it's a very, very good premise for a story. And it's actually said that the movies more or less are what actually happened. The major difference that I could find was that the Warrens, Ed and Lorraine Warren, if you remember, they are demonologists and paranormal investigators. They were called to help with the demonic presence, but they have never performed an exorcism. At the Perron house in particular, they performed a seance. The couple said specifically that they would never perform an exorcism because it has to be done by a priest and be approved by a bishop. So for me, if my house was like the Conjuring house, stuff's moving around, it's smelling terrible, I'm seeing things that aren't there, creep in behind the corner, I find out that this witch lived in my house and cursed anyone that might take her land, I'm moving. I'm moving like immediately. But the Perrons actually lived in this house for 10 years. Now, mind you, again, just to remind you of the timeline, the Exorcist movie came out in 1973. The Perrons moved into their house in 1970 and moved out in 1980. So the timeline does overlap, and I think that's a little bit suspect, personally. And it just seems to me like if this stuff is really happening in your house and you have 5 daughters, why aren't you trying to leave? I mean, I understand that financially it may not have been possible for them. Like, not everyone could just buy a house and be like, oh, never mind, and then move, right? But if my life is in danger, if my children's life were in danger, if I had children, I would try to stay with my parents, with my friends. I would try to sell the house and kind of hop around until I could find a home suitable for my family. But it seems like by staying there, if what they're saying is true, you're putting your family's lives at risk. And specifically, the wife, Carolyn, she was actually possessed, or she was allegedly possessed. So, I don't know, man. I personally think it's a little suspect, the timeline. And I also think it's suspect that they stayed there for so long. Like, 10 years is a long time to stay in a house that's trying to kill you, right? And even weirder is that people live there now. And I couldn't find any information about whether or not they experience any supernatural stuff. But they did say that it's actually really frustrating to live there because fans of the movie just show up to their house, try to take pictures, try to like tour the house, not realizing that literally someone lives there. So if you're one of those people who are like, I want to go see the Conjuring house, people live there. So maybe don't do that. Finally, I watched The Rite, which is a 2011 movie also based on true events. The movie is about a young priest who is struggling in his faith, and he ends up traveling to Rome to study under a seasoned exorcist. The people in the movie are actually inspired by real people that actually exist. So, for example, Anthony Hopkins' character, Father Lucas, is inspired by Father Carmine. So the people are real people, but that's kind of where the similarities between real life and the movie end. As it turns out, the movie is more so based on the book, which is called The Rite, The Making of a Modern Exorcist by Matt Baglio. In the book, it's like an anthology almost, like different things that have happened during exorcisms, but they didn't actually happen to Father Gary Thomas, who is the real life person. For example, in the movie, frogs basically infest where the exorcist Father Lucas is living. This didn't actually happen, but Father Carmine did witness a woman vomit up a live frog during an exorcism. So, understandably, it's like a little bit of movie magic, I guess. One of the more iconic scenes from that movie is the woman vomiting up the nails that would have been used to crucify somebody. And that story is supposedly true, but it was kind of like, my friend told me that his father told him that his uncle told him that this happened. And that to me is like, if you've ever played telephone, you know that what you end up with at the end is nothing like what you started with. So yeah, I don't buy that. I do think that, all that being said, I thought it was an interesting perspective on exorcism. Because even in the Exorcist movie, the girl that is possessed, she becomes possessed initially because she's playing with a Ouija board. And the idea is that somebody must invite the demon in. And in this case, it was by using objects of the occult. Now, it's particularly interesting to me that Father Lucas in the movie actually does become possessed by a demon. And it's almost something that seems so ridiculous because, I mean, he's in a state of grace, right? Like, he is a priest, he's an exorcist, he believes in God. But it's actually deeper than that, right? Because throughout the movie, we can see that this priest is questioning the existence of God. And that is a way that he kind of invites the demon in, right? He's putting himself in the path of demons all the time. And the only way that he's ever safe is because of his faith. So when his faith wavers, that's like leaving the door open a crack. And just to be clear, I am not religious. I'm not involved in the church in any way. I am not attempting to speak for anyone in the church. I'm not attempting to be sacrilegious. I'm just a movie watcher and an avid Googler. So, yeah, I'm just speculating. I do welcome anyone else's opinions. You can always send me a DM on Instagram, and I'd love to talk about it. And particularly, I would love to talk about how I can only find one case of possession in the last 20 years. Only one. And based on commentary about the book, The Rite, it was theorized that actually demonic possessions would be far more common because we live in a more sinful time, supposedly. But that seems to not be the case. And I would think that with as much as our media focuses on anything terrible, that if people were being possessed, that would be like prime news. So it seemed particularly interesting to me that even though we have a ton of like possession movies now, it was actually around the time of The Exorcist that it seemed to be the most common. So for example, the serial killer Son of Sam said that he was possessed by demons and that's why he killed people. The Arnie Johnson case from the Demon Murder Trial, all were in the 70s and 80s, coincidentally right after the release of the Exorcist movie. So is it all hype? Did people just, I don't know, kill people and then be like, oh man, I was possessed by the devil and that's why I did it, and try to write it off that way, maybe for their conscience or for their trial? I don't know. And to be quite honest with you, even though I'm not sure that it's legit, truly, I'm not sure I'm willing to mess around and find out, right? I absolutely refuse to use a Ouija board in any context at all, period. I am pretty wary about like tarot cards, for example, any kind of occult object. I'm just like, could it open a door? I don't know. Do I think the door exists? I don't know. I think it is possible. And that's probably what's actually the most frightening thing, is that I can't say for certain whether or not it's true. It's kind of like the movies or TV shows that kind of don't show you the demon, right? It's just glowing eyes in the dark. And that to me is far more frightening than when you bring the demon or the monster into the light. Because if I can see it, I know it's there, I know what it looks like, I'm actually not that afraid of it anymore. But if I don't know what it looks like, I don't know when it's going to pop up, if it's going to pop up, that's the scary part. And now, on that note, my spooky friends, we are about at the end of our time together. I will see you guys in a couple of Tuesdays, maybe on YouTube, maybe not. We'll see if I have a mental breakdown again. Who knows? In the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter and Facebook at WriteCBrown, WRITEC Brown, or follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at You're So Quiet Pod, YOURE, So Quiet Pod. You can also visit my blog and website at cbrownauthor.com, and you can actually find the podcast on YouTube if you prefer to watch a video. At the moment, the episodes that I have up there are just static cover art, but we'll see what I can put together for the future. As always, please do not forget to rate, review, and subscribe to help out your favorite introvert. Okay, love you. Bye.